Mika, good morning and welcome to the forum at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Spencer Graves. I am a member of the forum committee. This forum is a platform for this discussion of significant issues, especially those which involve ethical values in the contemporary world and promote critical thinking. It has been doing this since 1943. We ask the speaker to present for about 35 minutes. We will then pause to request donations and followed by a question and answer session of about 20 minutes. This program is live streamed on YouTube where viewers can post questions in the chat. And George Baggett will monitor those questions and ask them of the speaker on your behalf. People in the room with me, please silence your cell phones. Today, Bob Grove will discuss his new book on Grove's Field Guide to Climate Change. It's available on Amazon and elsewhere. Grove is the president of the Climate Council. His organization has been expanding Earth Day into a week-long Earth Fest, which ends today. Earth Day has been commemorated each year on April 22 since 1970. Grove is an activist, author, and the host of the Climate Hour, which broadcasts one Monday each month, 6 to 7 p.m. on 90.1 FM KKFI Kansas City Community Radio. Bob?
Well, thank you, Spencer, and thank you, All Souls, for hosting this today. I'm just going to jump right into this. We have a small but very influential audience here, I can see. Spencer already told you a lot about me, so we can jump over this. My primary activism has been as president of the Climate Council for a number of years here in the metro area. I'm also the executive producer of the Climate Hour podcast, as Spencer mentions. That's on KKFI. You can also find that at climatehour.net. And we also do the video podcast at YouTube/ClimateGKC. So a lot of options there. Guest speaker here. I speak on a variety of topics. I'm scheduled to speak with the Missouri Green Party's national convention or state convention here in Missouri in June on plastics, of all things. And published by Wordsinger. We're obviously here to talk about my new field guide to climate change. I'm looking forward to that. And watch for my field guide to plastics, which will be releasing early next year. And there's the field guide to climate change. As Spencer mentioned, it's available now in paperback and ebook on Amazon. We have the EPUB version of the ebook coming out on Google Books and Apple Books probably by mid-May, and the audiobook will hopefully be available in June. So let's jump right in with what's happening now and prosper going forward. I think that's important that we take action, both to help the environment and to help ourselves. I mean, all actions ultimately are self-centered. We want to survive. We want our families to survive. We want our communities to survive. And we have to look at these issues from that perspective to actually motivate great change. Was talking to Spencer earlier about some of the big issues of fossil fuel subsidies and cap and trade and all of that. And I pointed out to Spencer that those are important issues. We have to look at those. My focus is more coming from the individual point of view of what you and I can do. And that's really a big issue. As Americans, we have the largest carbon footprint in the world. I mean, we can look at China and India and say they're producing more carbon than we are, but they also have thousands of times more people than we are. If you divide the carbon emissions of these countries by their population, break it down per capita, you'll find that Americans emit 16 times the greenhouse gases of anybody else in the world. And that's to do with American consumerism. We buy products from all over the world. The food systems of the world are feeding us. We are unique as Americans in that we have the most easy way of fixing climate change, and that's just by modifying our consumerism, our food habits, the way we drive, all these things. So we're in a unique position to make changes to the world. And that's a responsibility. That's both a curse and a blessing, if you will. It's kind of like getting double coupons. A change we can make has double the impact, of 16 times the impact of a change somebody in China or India can make. So keep that in mind. So, three things. How do we prosper in a post climate change world? And I call this my trifecta. we have to learn how to prepare for climate change, both the climate change that's here right now, we're living with climate change, and also the climate change that's coming down the road. We have to learn how to stay healthy and safe, both within this changing world where we're looking at more temperature extremes and more weather disasters. We have to learn how to be safe, and also in terms of the environmental pollutants that are coming out of climate change. Also, in terms of the pandemic related viruses, a lot of those are being driven from wilderness into urban settings, what they call those novel viruses. Those are being driven into our systems by climate change, by our food systems. And we have to learn how to save money. We can't be prosperous unless we're preserving our income. If we are spending everything wastefully to, run the air conditioner and keep it cool or those things, we're not going to prosper. We're going to basically be living hand to mouth because it's costing us so much to fight these issues. So there are ways that we can make ourselves um, more prepared for climate and save money while we're doing that. And those are the action items I'm focusing on in my book. So Field Guide to Climate Change, learning how to prosper in this post-climate change world. And I'd like to, this isn't really a book reading, but I thought this would be a good place to just read the back cover of my book, give you a feel for the flavor and kind of the intent of what's going on here. So face it, climate change has happened. It's no longer a future threat. We're living with it today. Let's just accept that fact and move forward. We have to survive an ever-growing range of weather disasters, an ever-growing list of natural disasters, of weather extremes, a steady drip of pandemic-prone viruses, and the economic impacts of skyrocketing energy and food costs. The environment is filled with new challenges, but we can survive, even prosper. Climate is a big issue, and it's easy to get lost in all the jargon and abbreviations. Where do you even begin to address something this big? Even if we don't let ourselves get overwhelmed emotionally, it's far too easy to spend all of our time and money digging out of the last disaster instead of preparing for the next. There are easy, clear, simple steps we can take to prepare for climate change, both the climate change that's already here and the climate change coming down the road. The first step is to break this big complex problem down into manageable sections, each with a group of small, clear options that are easily taken and together help us secure our health and safety, save money, and position us for a safe and prosperous future. The old adage, caveat emptor, buyers beware, it applies to climate change as much as it does used cars. And it's our responsibility to beware of greenwashing and to make personal choices that assure the health, safety, and welfare of ourselves, our communities, our children, and future generations. This field guide will help. So that's kind of the summary of what I wanted to accomplish with this field guide, and hopefully I have. Here's the table of contents. You can see how we've broken the problem down into these easily managed sectors. And each chapter ends with a series of talking points, just small 1, 2 line sentences extracted from that chapter that are designed to let you enter into conversations with other people. Talking points, a way to bring these up and discuss them with other people, helping expand the base that can help us do that. And then after the talking points, there's going to be a short list of actions. These are those personal, small things that we can do to help position us for this prosperous future. I like science. I don't know about the rest of you, but I love the science. I love the numbers. I love studying climate change and all the things behind it. I think it's important that we understand why we have climate change, why it's happening, so that we can take positive actions and do those with knowledge, with intent, instead of just following somebody's advice. If we understand it, we believe it, then we're more likely to move forward and take action on it. Not everybody likes science, though. Sometimes the numbers people just kind of glaze over and like, ooh, what's that? So what I've done in the book is I've moved all the science into the introduction. Um, really. And if you don't want the science, just skip the introduction and get into the book where it tells you here's the things you need to do to survive, to prosper, all those kind of things. But if you love the science and if you want to be in a position to have discussions with other people that may not quite understand the science, the introduction is really good because it's going to give you all of that. Um, here's kind of some of the data that I drew from to address, for the introduction, just to give us the science. And, the big thing is greenhouse gas emissions. We keep talking about that. And, greenhouse gases are CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, the F gases, the fluorinated hydrocarbons. Those are the things we're putting into the air that's causing global warming. This is data coming from the red jiggly line is a daily measurement of CO2 at the Mauna Loa Observatory on Big Island, Hawaii. So they've been measuring carbon there since early 1900s, late 1800s. I take that back. It was the 1950s when he started it. Dr. Keeling did that. The little blue line is the same measurement being taken at the South Pole. So you can see how CO2 is increasing. These are parts per million. That's the ppm. You see the time at the bottom. You can see that growing. Now, what are we doing? We're looking at ice core samples. So as if all those thermometer measurements weren't enough, the scientists have done ice core samples, and ice cores are kind of like trees. They got a layer for each year. So the scientists can get into that one layer and extract how much CO2 is in the atmosphere that year. So you can see there's a lot of data where that looks like the Volsec ice cores. We've drilled really deep, believe me. They've got ice cores several miles long. You see that data growing at the bottom, 400,000 years, 600,000 years. We've got data going back 800 millennia showing the CO2 measurements in the air and also temperatures. Let me get a graphic. And here's what that looks like in the static. So the scientists can tell us how much CO2 is in the air. And you can see the ice ages. Is that? Yeah, there it is. I guess that doesn't work on the screen. You can see the ice ages. When the CO2 emissions in the air, the composition of CO2, a greenhouse gas, when that gets down to like 180 parts per million, that creates an ice age. And we see all those low spots along there. And then when it gets up into the 280s, up towards 300, that's created these hot interstitial periods. So the scientists have been able to measure that. The thing that we walk away with this graph, over 800,000 years, we've seen the carbon levels, the greenhouse gas levels go up and down for various reasons. And, we can talk about orbital variation, the planet getting further from the sun or closer to it. We talk about that in the book. You can see events like volcanic activities or asteroid hits that puts carbon into the air and forces these things to happen. But in all 800,000 years of history on this planet that science has measured, we've never gone over 330 parts per million. That 300 was a cap in all those millennia. Over the right, we can see how we've suddenly started going up. Our carbon levels have gone above 3. I checked yesterday. You can go to co2.earth on the internet, and they'll give you the current CO2 ppm, and it was 422.63, I believe. So it is continuing to go up. And it's that carbon thing at the end that is really throwing us out of whack. So that's some of the hard data, if you like the science. We also talk about global warming. Look at the temperatures here. This is a chart prepared by NASA. And what they did is they took the temperature average of the planet from 1951 to 1980, averaged that as a median point. And then what we're measuring is variance from that. Are we below the average? Are we above the average? And you can see the years kind of small in the middle, what we're in the 1980s now, 1990s. You can see how the planet is getting warmer. And these are hard measurements using thermometers. This isn't ice, this is really hard data. You kind of hard time arguing with that. Here's what we look at in 1918. So looking at temperature changes over the last 50 years compared to that average in the 1951 to 1980. So we can demonstrate the planet is getting warmer. There's a graphical representation of that. The animation we just watched is the black line on the right, and those are thermometer readings. So, around the world, weather stations taking their thermometer readings for the day and recording that. The squiggly blue line, we're back to the ice samples, and they can also determine temperatures, average surface temperatures for that area by looking at those ice sample layers. So you can see how the temperature again has kind of moved around over that 800,000 years. This is just the last 2,000 years on this chart, but kind of seeing that variation. And then we hit the Industrial Revolution, around 1880, early 1800s, and that's when we start seeing this spike. Industrial Revolution. That's when we learned how to burn things really well, right? Started putting up the factories, started burning fossil fuels. Put factories around the world, just started cranking out the carbon, burn things, burn things. That's where man got involved, and that's where we start seeing all these spikes going up. And we also look at the data on weather disasters because these are all related, right? Greenhouse gases causing global warming, that's causing the climate change, which interrupts our normal climate systems. And because of that, we have weather disasters. This is NOAA data, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You can see how over time we're getting more and more disasters. The green is severe storms, so the hurricanes, things like that. That's obviously a big growing factor. Here's I mean, I used to read through all of this, but at this point, I say, why bother? Let's just look at our newspaper. Open your door. How many natural disasters have we already had this year? Look at the last three bullet points. Looking since 1980, and this is just the United States, and we're just talking about weather disasters that cost more than $1 billion to clean up. I think that's kind of funny. If it cost 100 million, we're going to ignore it, right? That's silly. But these are just the $1 billion weather disasters. We've had 241 of those since 1980, and the data is going through 2018. So you divide that out. That's 6.2 natural disasters a year average. But if you look at the recent 5 years, 2014 to 2018, that's doubled. So we're seeing double. And that data is actually a little old here. So my book, I've got that up through 2022. So, and I've broken it down by decades here. So in the United States in the 1980s, we averaged $3 billion disasters a year. In the 1990s, that doubled to $6 billion disasters a year. 2000s, it went up to 7 natural disasters a year. 2010s, it almost doubled again. It went up to 13 natural disasters a year. Now, here's the thing. The last 3 years, 2020 through 2022, we're now up to 20 natural disasters per year. And if you look at what's happened in the last 4 months, I think we're on track to really blow that number away this year. So we got really good scientific data that shows us greenhouse gases are increasing, showing us that the planet's temperature is going up, showing us that the number of weather disasters are increasing exponentially. And that kind of leads me to this summary of the climate crisis. This is what it's all about. If you walk away with nothing else but this, you can understand the climate crisis. Increasing greenhouse gases causes global warming, which creates these dramatic climate change events that are leading to weather disasters. As humans, what we're concerned about is the weather disasters. They're killing people, they're destroying our infrastructure, they're disrupting our food systems, they're impacting our economies. We can't live with the weather disasters. And if you trace back through this chain of causation, we know the weather disasters are happening because our climate systems are being upset. Jet streams are moving, hot cold patterns are shifting. People learn to live, people, animals, plants, we learn to live within a given climate system. And when that climate for that area shifts, when it shifts radically, that's when plants start dying, when animals start migrating, when infrastructure starts collapsing, whether that's floods or droughts or wildfires or blizzards. I mean, I'm just thinking of California right now. You've got the big sky rivers coming in. Suddenly they've got floods, they've got, you know, tens of feet of snow, and that's coming off of drought and wildfires. That's climate disruption that's creating lots of disasters. And we know that's caused by global warming. We've seen that the planet warms up. That's what causes our jet streams to shift. And all of that's caused by the greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, the fluorocarbons. And the fluorocarbons are what we run in our air conditioners, our refrigerators. We use those to manufacture computer chips, things like that. Those are what's causing. And as humans, we want to stop the weather disasters, but we can't control the weather. However, we can control the greenhouse gas emissions, both reducing what we put in the air and taking some of the stuff that's already there out of the air. So, prospering in a post climate change world, this is a post climate change world. We're living with this, but we can still prosper by understanding this and taking actions to be prepared for those temperature and rainfall variations, and by reducing our own carbon footprint. Ironically, all the solutions that slow climate change also make us healthier. Isn't that nice? We can be healthier while we're changing climate change. And the third thing, all the actions I've found in this book will actually save us money. So, what's to argue with? We're going to save money, we're going to be healthier, we're going to help the environment. It's a win-win-win scenario. Let's jump back to the table of contents here. So, like I say, the big problem out there, the way we deal with that is we break it down into small sections. And that's what I've done for the next 5 chapters. I actually use the EPA's breakdown of global greenhouse gas emissions as a foundation. You can see there's 3, 6, there's 6 pie slices there. I ignore the other energy because that 10% of greenhouse gas emissions comes from extraction of fossil fuels. So that's the drilling, the fracking, the mining that brings those up, refines them, transports those to the other sectors. So that actually ends up being spread to the other sectors. But in the five remaining sectors, one, two, three, four, five, there's actions that we can take in each of those to reduce the emissions of those and to make us more prosperous. So we're going to look at each of those separately. So plugging in, that's looking at the power sector, how we get our electricity and such. And I thought I'd just read the summary from that chapter again, so I don't have to think so much. Plugging in, where are we at? Yeah, so just the final few paragraphs here. Renewable energy is more profitable for the utility power companies because the fossil fuel technology peaked years ago, and new wind and solar tech continues to double its efficiency every few years. Plus, consider the ongoing operating expenses. Coal and natural gas-fired power plants depend on a constant stream of fossil fuel extraction and transportation to keep running. Wind and solar, once installed, run on air movement, light from the sun. No extraction, no transportation costs. That in itself should tell us where the future profits are. Can you imagine the glee of the utility board members discussing the profits from installing wind and solar and then charging their customers for that free energy for decades to come? Why wouldn't they? Yeah. Another thing is that we're running out of fossil fuels, and what's left is harder to reach. We used to drill an oil well on our back 40 and get a gusher. Now we have to drill offshore or frack used up fields to suck up leftovers. The growing costs of these fossil fuels are passed on to the power plants and eventually to us in our electric and gas bills, and it's only going to get worse. Stanford University reports that all known oil fields will be gone by 2052. The natural gas goes away in 2060 and coal is gone by 2090. Supply and demand. Once it's gone, we're not going to be able to afford it anymore. So let's look at the writing on the walls. They all say fossil fuels are a dying power source. Fossil fueled power costs more than wind and solar. Fossil fuel presents multiple health and climate hazards. And we're going to run out of fossil fuels in the next few years anyway. At its most basic, do you want to buy a new fossil fueled home, then replace its power systems by 2060 when the natural gas goes away? Is that a good investment? You may plan to sell your home before then, but consider the impact of an outdated power system on your home's resale value. And what about a new car? General Motors has announced that it will discontinue all gas vehicles by 2035. What's the resale value of your new gas car going to be in a few years? Another thing to think about is your health. There's lots of research coming out of universities like Harvard and Stanford that look at the toxic gases released in our homes by gas line leaks, by burning fossil fuels in your furnaces and on your stoves. This has to be hurting us and our children. We've taken steps to remove lead paint from our homes. We need to take the same steps to remove fossil fuels from our homes. In short, we want to be plugged in, not setting things on fire. If it takes a spark or a pilot light to get it going, then replace it with something you plug in. Converting all electric power, Converting to all electric power is an investment in the resale value of your properties and a major investment in the health of your family. Plus, it fights climate change. That's a trifecta of wins. Besides, it's a lot easier to plug something in than to get that pilot light lit. Many electric companies are now ready to sell you power from their new wind and solar farms, but even if you're still getting your electricity from an old coal-fired power plant, you should still convert. Shutting off the gas and going electric saves you money, it increases the value of your home, and it gives you a healthy environment. It's time to take the fossil out of fuel. Bottom line, the following field guide chapters will show you how easy it is to electrify your home and car. And then, like I say, we go into talking points, the things I've just read, talking points to share, friends, neighbors, relatives, and then the action items that will tell you here's the steps to take to make this happen. Next chapter, sheltering in space in place. And this is a big one. I mean, this is talking to our home, and there's so many great ways we can electrify the home. I mean, here's all the different things we talk about within that chapter. Simple things. I mean, and these are simple, understandable things. We try to take the science, put it in the introduction, and then just share easy ways to do things. Lighting. We've got the traditional incandescent bulb, 60 watts of light. You can replace that with an LED bulb, produces the same light for 7 watts. You can pay for 60 watts of electricity, or you can pay for 7 watts for the same light. This incandescent is one costs maybe $1 and it's going to last for 1,200 hours. This LED may cost you $4, but it's going to last for 25, 30,000 hours. It's going to take 20 of these to last as long as one of these. So I could buy 20 plus of these for $20, or I can buy this one for $4. Which one's going to save us money? And the incandescent, this is the original light bulb invented by Thomas Edison. This thing's 100 years old technology. It creates light by running electricity through a metal filament, heating it up to super hot so that it radiates photons, photons that we can see light. Um, er, and it's using tungsten as a filament. It's heating that tungsten to 4,500 degrees. You ever touch a light bulb when it's been running for a while? Hot burns. This LED over here emits light by running electricity through a silicon chip, a diode, and it just emits photons. It emits no heat. So we've got a choice here of spending more money for the power to run this, less money here. I mean, this is going to use 9 times the electricity of this. This is going to burn you. It's going to hurt if it touch it. This produces no heat at all. And this one is so much better for the environment. That's an easy choice that you can make in your home to save money, to reduce the health hazards of the incandescent, the hot burning lights, and also to save the planet. Now, I also like to talk about the compact fluorescent. So if this is incandescent using this energy and this is the LED, here's a compact fluorescent here. Uses less energy. But if you're familiar with fluorescent lights, and I think we may be seeing fluorescent lights, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Fluorescent lights very common in the office, and the compact fluorescent is that little spiral tube bulb. I mean, we see those everywhere. Great when they came out. We thought, wow, that saves us a lot of money, a lot of electricity. So good, right? The bad thing about compact fluorescence is that fluorescent technology, and I won't go into the science, but it's about running electricity through gases, and the gases stimulate the phosphorescent lining of the tube, and then the lining of the tube emits photons, and we see the light. The thing is, the gases include mercury vapor, and we all know what mercury does: heavy metal, brain damage, all of those horrible things. You don't want to break a compact fluorescent tube. It's a massive health hazard. Most states now have made it illegal to throw a CFL into the trash, into the landfill. You have to take those to special recyclers. Most of us don't realize what a hazard those fluorescent tubes are. So again, we've got the choice, very expensive hot burning incandescents. CFLs will save us some money, but I'm really afraid of that mercury vapor. Handle those carefully. And then the LED, that's a perfect solution. So you can see that's the kind of things we're looking at each of these levels. Heating and cooling, we talk about the ductless mini splits that they've been using in Europe and Japan for the last 50 years. 90% of homes worldwide use a ductless mini split system. And mini split is a compressor sitting outside, like an old heat pump, but these are much more efficient. You got a compressor outside. You got multiple heat exchangers in different zones of your house, and they're connected by flexible tubes, just like your air conditioner connected to your furnace. So this mini split is just the compressor with multiple zones. Where that saves you money, number one, it's super efficient. But number two, you only have to heat and cool parts of your house that you want heated and cooling. You're not cooling or heating your entire house with one thermostat. Each zone can have a separate setting. And more importantly, it eliminates the duct work in your house. We lose 40% of your energy investment by heating and cooling the ducts before that hot or cold air ever gets to the register in the room. Think about that. 40% of your energy cost goes into the basement, goes into the walls before it ever gets to the room to heat and cool you. The ductless systems have no ducts, so there is no lost heating, cooling cost. Plus, we can, in terms of health, those ductworks full of dust, mites, allergens, rodents, reptiles that have escaped from your kids' terrariums. I mean, those are breeding grounds for unhealthy things. And they're selling duct cleaning services these days, but I've got a reference in here to the EPA where they say that doesn't work. So again, the footnotes, you can check that out if you want. Anyway, HVAC coming out of Europe, Japan, these things are proven. They're very cheap to install. They will save you money. They will save you electricity usage, and they're healthier because the ducts have gone away. So that's the kind of stuff that we provide in the book. And, simple action items on all of these. And, I don't have time to go through them. I'd love to, I mean, I could stand here and talk an hour about this. It's just, a lot of stuff that really excites me. But these are simple things, simple improvements you can make to your home. Notice renters down there. I mean, a lot of times you rent, you can't change your furnace, you can't change your plumbing, but you can change your appliances, your kitchen appliances. And the thing about cooking is we're now moving to induction cooking, and that's cooking done with electromagnets. The magnetic field heats the pan cooks the food. So there's no heat wasted to the air. Just as ducks waste 40% of your energy cost, a gas stove or an electric stove is wasting 60% of your energy cost heating the air around those pots and pans. Induction cooking, new technology, really cool, again, coming out of Europe. Induction cooking just makes the pan hot. You can actually put your hand on the stove and it's perfectly cool. It's just the pan that's hot. So again, something that renters can do. They can turn off that gas stove, put a, a little piece of plywood to avoid scratches, put a portable induction cooktop on top of that. They save money, they save the environment, and they're living in a healthier environment. So let me run on. I think I got about 5 minutes left here. How we get there looks at mobility, transportation, and I'm going to talk about active transportation, which is biking and walking, meaning those are things that are good for us. Even people at our age, biking and walking is good for us. The doctors tell us to do it. The Federal Highway Agency, they report that 28% of all trips in the United States are less than 1 mile, and 60% of those are somebody getting into a car. They report that 50% of all trips in the US are less than 3 miles. Most of us can walk a mile. I mean, if you do the step thing, count your steps, 10,000, it's only 2,000 steps to get to a mile. Most of us are trying to walk 10,000 steps a day. So, if you're walking someplace instead of driving that car, it's healthy, saving you a lot of money, and good for the environment if you want to bike. And we talk about the growing number of bike trail, or not even bike lanes and pathways. Look what's happening in Kansas City. We have all these bike lanes going in, and that's good for us, good for the environment and good for the city too, because it's cheaper to put in a bike lane than it is a car lane. It's cheaper to maintain a bike lane than a car lane. So we're saving tax monies. Active transportation, electric buses and light rail. I mean, you're close enough to Main Street here. You can see the light rail coming here at Kansas City, and it's free. That is so super. Also, electric buses. They now have electric buses that can go over 1,000 miles on a single charge. So we're starting to see buses that can take us long ranges. Electric vehicles, I could talk an hour on that, the new EVs, and I'm not talking hybrids. Hybrids were great in their day, but that's passé. The hybrid has both the electric and the gas motor, so it has the problems of both. The new EVs, and I think I just priced the 2023 Bolt, Chevy Bolt EV, base price 25, 27,000, four-door. It's got nearly a 300-mile range on a single charge. It gets 120 miles per gallon equivalent, so it's electricity, but they calculate that getting 120 miles per gallon on that, and it accelerates 0 to 60 in like 5 seconds. What's not to like? That's a great car. And long haul, we talk about long haul, be the times when you are going to travel internationally and such. The break point there is 600 miles, and I'm talking gas versus airplane. If you're going to go further than 600 miles, take the plane. All of the emissions of a plane is taking off and landing. Once it gets up there and it's traveling flat, it's pretty efficient. So the longer they go, the more this is broken up per mile. So if you're going less than 600 miles, less carbon. If you take the car, if you're going more than 600 miles, take the plane. And I also talked about the new electric planes. I'm so excited about that. We haven't heard about those. But right now, United Airlines has ordered 200 electric taxis, flying taxis, that they're going to put in for commuting from their airport hubs to downtown. For instance, Chicago, supposed to be in by 2025. You'll be able to fly into O'Hare, hop on a flying taxi. They'll take you down to the loop in 12 minutes. That's an hour commute by taxi. And they're saying that it'll be the same price as the taxi. Hawaiian Airlines has already paid for, I think, like 100 commuter planes, and these are 100 passenger all electric planes. They have 130 commuters going between the islands each day. They're doing that with electric. United Airlines has ordered commuters, and these are larger planes, 200, 300 seats to do the regional flight. Electric flight is real. We're going to see it in the next few years. I see Spencer squirming. You want me to wrap up here? Getting close. The other two chapters, we got to eat. Give me 3 minutes. We got to eat. That talks about food systems, and food impacts so many things. I mean, I can just keep talking forever, but I mean, the climate, land use. Livestock uses 83% of our available farmlands and produces 17% of the world's calories. 80% of our land, less than 20% of our calories. food crops, and those are the plants that we eat, not the feed crops that we feed our animals, but the food crops. They grow on 18% of our land, available farmland, yet they produce over 80% of our calories. That's insane. If we grow more food, think how many more calories would be available. Water usage, 99 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of tomatoes, 1,850 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. So that's the kind of things we're going to talk about there. And what we wear. This is looking at the industrial sector, 21% of greenhouse gas emissions. There's 74 classes of industry out there. One of those, 1 out of 74 produces 8.1% of all global greenhouse gas emissions, just one. And that same one, looking at a different way, that one industry out of 74 produces nearly 40% of all industrial greenhouse gas emissions. It's also responsible for all of our microfiber pollutants. It's responsible for 20% of all industrial water pollution. And it's responsible for most of our waste and landfill.
Buying clothes has never been easier. 80
it's the
billion
fashion
items are
industry.
manufactured every year.
We're putting too much product out there, most of that product ending up in landfill.
So-called fast fashion allows consumers to buy more, but they're wearing these garments less often and disposing of them at an unprecedented rate.
Our clothing, huge environmental impact, huge health impact. And we talk about, the pesticides and herbicides used on traditional cotton, things like that. So that's all in the book. So the trifecta, we can save money, increase the value of our property by following these guidelines. We can improve our health in so many ways. I mean, the food we eat, the environment we live in, and boom, we can fight climate change all at the same time. So, Spencer, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bob. Great talk. So George, you want to bring that basket up here and we will request donations to cover the cost of this facility and the staff time needed to support these programs. Your donations keep the forum streaming each week. Instructions for how to donate online should appear in the chat for those following on YouTube Live. Checks can be mailed to All Souls UU Church at 4501 Walnut Street, Kansas City, Missouri 64111. Please mention the forum in the memo line of your check. Now, if you have questions, please come on up to the microphone to ask your question. Speak clearly into the microphone. People watching via YouTube Live should be able to put questions in the chat and watch the speaker if they're standing where I'm standing now. One question per speaker, please, until everyone has had an opportunity to ask a question, and no speeches so that we can make better use of the time of our presenter. Thank you.
I live on Quality Hill in a senior complex. We have 156 units. Many of the people living there do not drive. So they would love to walk from place to place, and frequently they do. Unfortunately, our sidewalks in that area are in such terribly bad shape. They are slanty or missing in some areas, and it's really very dangerous for us seniors to be walking on them very much due to balance issues and tripping issues. So my question for you is, have you talked to the Kansas City Council in relation to making sidewalks be in better shape so that us seniors as well as other people can actually walk on them safely and get from place to place? Have you talked to the Kansas City, Missouri City Council about that as well as other issues too?
I've talked about other issues, but no, I have not talked about that specifically. And that is an issue. I mean, Kansas City is a very old, mature town. It's a beautiful town. But I know even Midtown, where I've lived for a lot of years, the sidewalks are really bad and our sewer systems are really bad. There's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of that's in the work. They're talking about replacing sewers. I mean, there's federal mandates in place that we have to clean it up because so much of Kansas City sewage is getting washed over into the storm systems and then out into the rivers. So that's being addressed. There's money allocated for that. It's a complex problem because it's really big. But when they start doing those sewers, they're going to do the sidewalks too. Now, that doesn't necessarily help your community, and I would encourage you and your community as a whole to show up at city council meetings. You know, a single voice has a small impact. A community coming in and speaking as a group voice has a larger impact. So, you know, that's certainly something you can do. And the city council, I have found, has been very responsive and open to those conversations. Will they get it done next week? You know, there's a lot on the table, and like I say, the sewer mandates and things like that. It's going to happen eventually, but you and your friends and your community there at the senior center raising your voice. I'd urge you to, you know, get a group of your people you live with together and plan a little pilgrimage down to City Hall for one of those council meetings. You can register to speak at those. I mean, they have a little section at the end where citizens can come in and raise concerns. And this is a great concern to bring to their attention. So thank you for that.
Hello, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Electric cars. So my concern here is the infrastructure for that. So if you look particularly at apartment dwellers, low, moderate income families, there's no infrastructure. I don't see many property owners at that level being incentivized to create that structure for charging those cars. So could you address that?
Absolutely. And you're raising a great concern and a big concern when we're talking about climate equity specifically. I mean, how do the poor people who live in apartments and don't have access to the resources we do, how do they benefit from these? And it is a big concern. We need to keep that in mind. I know when Kansas City wrote up their climate plan 3, 4 years ago, one of the tenets there was providing electric cars to the poor communities. You know, at least incentives and stuff so poor people could afford the cars. And like that Chevy Bolt I mentioned, the 7,500 federal rebate is still available on that because that's an American-made car. So there are financial incentives. Infrastructure a little bit harder. I mean, how do you plug? I mean, I'm on the third floor of an apartment building. Where do I plug that in? And to be honest, I've been through apartment complex and I've seen the extension cords coming off the balcony and running out the parking lot. The problem with that, of course, is if you're plugging it into this wall outlet here, you're going to get about 5 miles per hour of charging. So that's a very slow trickle. You need to plug it. I mean, level 2 charging is like your dryer outlet, 220 volt. That will charge your car fully overnight, take about 7 hours. So you drive it into a garage, we plug it in. It's charged the next morning, you've got another 300-mile range. So great for those of us that have what you're raising is a valid concern. How do we help? And I think we have to do that by providing public charging stations at those apartments. If, and how do we do that? We have to incentivize the landlords, and rather than giving money to people, or in addition to giving money to people that need to buy these cars, we need to find a way to be funding or providing loans so that the landlords can put those charging stations in their apartment complexes. To me, that's the solution. Again, it's a private public collaboration of working with the city, finding the money to make that happen. I mean, Evergy would be a good person to talk to because they're selling electricity. Get them to provide the stations in partnership with the apartment owners, and that increases the value of the apartments. I mean, I'd rather live in an apartment with a charging plug outside, increases the value of the apartments. So the apartment owner benefits, Evergy benefits because it's selling more electricity. We benefit because the environment's safer and quieter and all those things electric brings. So does that help? Thank you. These are just all ideas off the top of my head.
I don't know why I hadn't already thought of effigy. Very private question. I have 3,800 pounds of lead acid batteries in my basement that are too old to use. And how do I get rid of them?
I need to talk to some of the local recyclers. I would think reaching out to Bridging the Gap. Have you already tried that?
Uh, to whom?
Bridging the Gap.
Yes.
And what did they say? We don't have to do this on air if you don't want to.
Mumbling.
That is a mess. I don't know how you ended up with that many pounds of lead acid batteries.
I had solar power since the beginning of the 21st century.
Oh, wow. So
And the
thank
batteries
you for
finally
that.
work.
Thank you for that. But yeah, those old batteries have improved so much. That I would think somebody should be able to recycle those. And I don't know off the top of my head who it is. So just keep searching. If you want to reach out to me at the Climate Council, Bob at climategkc.org. I can reach out to some of our partners in the Climate Council and see if they have suggestions. Okay, thank you.
My question is about some key industries. Right now, we have oxygen supplied to hospitals that are liquid oxygen,
Right.
and acetylene supplied to laboratories and industrial activities and cutting and whatever. These two products are very energy intensive to refrigerate oxygen from the air, separating air. In fact, the plant here in Kansas City is the primary customer of the Hawthorne Power Plant.
Mhm.
Is the oxygen plant over there by the Armco former Armco location. So how I don't see how, and I question the ability of the renewable energy
How do we address that?
concepts to address that. And the other one is burning coal and lime to make acetylene,
Seam.
calcium carbide.
Yeah.
So then it's also very energy intensive. Yes.
Absolutely. Complex questions, trying to segment those in my mind. Um, Certainly the refrigerants you mentioned, I mean, the cooling processes. And when we look at greenhouse gases, I mean, the cooling processes are those fluorohydrocarbons. We talk about global warming potential, CO2 being the standard baseline with a global warming potential of 1. We look at the other gases and they're much more damaging. Sulfur hexafluoride, for example, which is used in chip manufacturing, it has a global warming potential of 17,000. So you think of 1 metric ton of carbon, CO2, the same amount of that's going to cost 17,000 times the damage. So those kind of refrigerants are bad. Am I missing your point?
Yeah, you are. The point is the technology to make liquefaction of nitrogen, oxygen, and argon is they use 25,000 horsepower motors and compressors to compress the gas.
So your question is, can we generate enough renewable
no
energy to
refrigerant?
drive that?
No, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I don't know that I have an answer to that. Obviously, increasing amounts of solar and wind. I mean, we see that happening. How do we get enough to do those high industrial, the producing steel, things like that require great heat? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I think the technology continues to improve, and I have faith that as we go down the road, we'll continue to find ways to create more heat. I mean, what about getting into lasers? Electric powered lasers that can generate a great amount of heat. When you look at the physics industry, I mean, they're using lasers and these cyclotrons to do some pretty amazing things at a molecular level. Why can't we expand those lasers into a kiln environment to address some of the things you're talking about? And I know the scientists are working on new hydrocarbons to replace these F gases. So I know, am I vectoring away again? That's just something that's really big. But the scientists that are doing that are also looking at ways to increase the heat. So I think that there is hope down the road. Can I give you the answer right now? No, I can't. Sir?
As part of the Johnson County complex of museums, they have an all-electric home
Uh-huh.
that was built and set up in the 1950s. So we kind of are moving back to that all-electric home idea. What's
Absolutely.
the source of all this electricity that we're going to generate?
Well, 2 points. We should convert now. I mean, even if you're getting your electricity from a coal-fired plant, it's still going to be less greenhouse gas emissions if you're burning electric. It's going to be healthier if you're not burning that natural gas in your home. So even with the gas-powered plants, it's still better to move to electric, better for the environment, better for your health, save you money. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of wind going up, a lot of solar going up. And as I mentioned, the technology for like the solar, that tends to double every 3 years. So, a solar panel now that can produce 10 gigawatts, it'll be producing 20 gigawatts 3 years from now. So, and, answering your question too, I see the science for renewables continuing to double capacity every 3 years. And, we're not there yet to drive the kind of heat temperatures you're talking about in those industrial processes, but I think we'll be there in a few years, in 10 years. 20 windmills, it takes 20 windmills to run that process. Well, there you go. There's a man with science. I love that. Pull up your phone and look that thing up. Thank you. Spencer?
Sure. So I was thinking about support groups to help people who are trying to implement the stuff that you're talking about in your book, uh, talk to one another and get help working through
Um,
the details.
well, I know I've listed the book itself. I mean, I've put these at the end. Again, I don't want to interrupt the read, but there's 133 footnotes in here. And, you know, a lot of those are pointing you to sites, weatherization, places that will provide you the information on how to do this. And in some places, assistances like the renters who need weatherization. There's several federal programs that will help with that. The government, the EPA, have several sites that talk about incentives, paybacks if you want to install you know, ductless HVAC or new hot water, you can get paid for that rebates. I just looked at a site yesterday. I'm going to forget the name of it, website. It's in here, but it's a calculator that looks at the new Inflation Reduction Act. Is it the IRA? I get those acronyms confused, but yeah, yeah. Looks at that, and here's all this money available for renewables. It's a calculator that will ask for your zip code. It will then go out and look at all the new laws and say, you know, here's all the money we can give you for doing these things to your home. And they give you that long list, exactly what you're asking, Spencer. Replace your hot water heater, we'll give you this much money. Replace your HVAC, we'll give you this much money. New car, $7,500 rebate. So those are good sites. The government has a lot of those. A lot of those are listed here. We have more available on the Climate Council site at climategkc.org. Hi again.
You gave me so many new things to say, I forgot what I came up to say. Uh, I did forget. The apologies, but I can't say that the $5,000 that I spent for insulating my over 3-bedroom house
Huh?
uh, was worth more than all of the other things that I did to my house nearly 20 years ago.
I believe that.
Uh, $5,000 for insulation made thousands of dollars of difference
Really
over
does.
time.
Weatherization, and there's, like I say, the government has lots of programs that will provide you materials and
Now they didn't
instruction.
have them 20
Yeah,
years
I
ago.
understand 20 years. We've come a long ways in the last 20 years. We really have. The just awareness of climate change issues and we talked about the climate equity, the knowledge that we have to help the people that are most impacted. The thing about you know, people that are perhaps poorer than we are, they are least responsible for climate change. They're just not the consumers we are. They don't have the carbon footprint that we do living in these big houses with our big cars. They're the least responsible for climate change, but obviously they're the most impacted by it. And it's on our shoulders to do something about that. We have to help them while we help ourselves. Okay.
Have you addressed cremations as a
We have not.
costing?
Isn't that an
Uh,
interesting topic?
I read an article recently that said it takes a tank of SUV gas per cremation,
Hmm.
and only 1 in 3 burials at this point is actually a non-cremation, the others primarily. But they're also looking now at composting burials.
That's what I'm interested in. I've
So,
seen a lot of I think they've legalized that in Oregon. There's several states that have
mhm.
gone to composting now and services. And I've seen the videos. I mean, if you've been online, you've probably seen, you know, here's a big barrel. They're going to put you in, you know, put your remains in there with the leaves, the wood chips, all those good things. And then they roll the barrel around for 3 or 4 months. And at the end of it, here's a wonderful barrel of humus and stuff that your loved ones can take home and scatter on their yards or whatever they want to do. I think that's really a great solution.
Mm. And the other downside of the cremation that isn't very often talked about is the significant addition to pollution that it causes.
Absolutely. I mean, you're using a lot of fuel and obviously all that greenhouse gas emissions going up into the air. You keep going, this stuff is just, you know, amazing you or shocking you or, well, wonderful. That's never too old to learn.
So the Climate Council is a consortium, am I right?
It's a 501c3 Missouri corporation, so it's a public charity. And the Climate Council's function is to work with other environmental partners throughout the Midwest and provide them resources. So our motto is that we help amplify your voice. If anybody does environmental work, climate work, we'd love to partner. Go to climategkc.org and look at the partner page to learn more.
So, okay, so the partners then would be there. So what are some of the leading partners you think are most supportive of the message that you've got in your book here?
I think they're all supportive, every last one of them. I mean, they're the thing with environmental, I mean, there's over 150 great environmental groups that I know of in the metro area here. A lot of them do their own thing, and what we try to do with the council is kind of de-silo those people. So many times, we're so focused on our own little thing, whether that's planting trees or recycling or drive electric or urban permaculture. I mean, everybody has their focus. I have my focus. But ultimately, we have to get out of our silos and work together if we want to have that big impact that's going to change the world and, make things better going down the road.
So I visited a friend in Iowa last year,
Uh-huh.
past many of the huge wind turbines, right? And so when I was commenting about that, and I think Iowa now produces 50% of their electricity is through wind turbines.
And Ameren over in St. Louis is buying electricity from those wind turbines and bringing it down to St. Louis.
Okay. But when I talked to him about it, he said there was a lot of opposition in the community to it because it changes the what do I want to call it? It's not the runoff, but it's the how the water progresses throughout the territory.
You're
And
thinking
he
in
said
terms
that
of rainflow, you think it's disrupting the wind patterns, or you're talking about
no,
groundwater?
the
The groundwater.
patterns.
I would think that
So
would
what are
just
some
be
of the
installation,
oppositions?
wouldn't it? I mean, maybe it's the way they're going in the environment. I'm more familiar with the windmills out in East Kansas. I mean, a lot of relatives and such, but that's all flat prairie land out there. You drop a windmill in the middle of that, it's not going to disrupt anything. If you'd gone out there 10, 20 years ago, you'd be seeing oil wells all over those farms. They were pumping oil. And, the oil's gone, it's been pumped out. So now they're just basically pulling those oil wells and putting windmill there. So it's not changing the weather patterns for the Kansas. What's happening in Iowa? Maybe it's a question of
It
location.
was
Maybe
the
it's a question,
watershed. It was
yeah,
changing the watershed.
interrupting the watershed. So I would think more study before they do that. There's one of the big issues with renewables transport, having an infrastructure system that can move the electricity from where it's generated renewable to other parts of the country. One of the things I bring up in the book is solutionary rail. Are we? Solutionary rail?
All right. Well, thank you. I have a question. Thank you, Gary.
Can't argue with that. Carbon emissions of
The,
beef is a lot
we have a
higher than
YouTube
pork.
question here. Pamela Cawthorn. I would love to do some things that reduce my carbon footprint, but hesitate because of the rapid change in technology. I'm afraid my efforts would be out of date before it was paid for.
Don't think so. Change your light bulbs to LEDs. I mean, that
That's
will pay for
correct.
itself
Yeah,
this month.
that's a good idea.
If you're going to buy a new car, buy that electric. Seriously, if you buy a gas car, your resale value, you're just wasting your money. Buy that electric because that's the car that's going to have resale value down the road. Any improvement you make to your house, even if the technology is better down the road, any improvement you make to your house is going to save you money right now and increase the resale value of your house. So move away from that gas. I mean, we're talking gas technology that's decades old. Decades old. We're talking about light bulbs that were invented in the early 1900s. Technology's come a long ways in the last 100 years. I think you can take that step to the current technology, and then we'll worry about the next 100 years afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, next week's program this program will be broadcast on KKFI at noon on probably a week from Thursday. In addition, this session with Bob Grove so that would be May 4th at noon Central Time on 90.1 FM, or go to kkfi.org and click listen at that time, or you can go get the podcast there later. Next week, or you can also get the podcast by going video going to All Souls KC.org and look for the forum YouTube channel. Next week, the forum will feature Sue Ellen Freed discussing the transformative power of pain. This will be the second of 3 presentations on youth suicide prevention. So thanks again to our speaker.
Thank you.
Brad will be in the library for a little.
Sure. And I do have a few books available if anybody would like one, $10 cash.
I just wanted to commend you for an outstanding presentation as well as your whole work that we've been doing. I don't know if anybody else is for that. So, I can do this. Really? Terrific. This is wonderful. Well, I'm glad. Thank you. It's just a lot of work you've done. This was an excellent presentation.